like to call the meeting to order. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Glad for coming today. Please read the special town board meeting notice and roll call.
Certainly. Members of the Town Board, special Town Board meeting Thursday, May 1st, 2025. Please be advised that pursuant to Section 62 of Town Law, a special Town Board meeting will be held both in person in the Town Board Meeting Room, Southampton Town Hall, 116 Hampton Road, Southampton, New York, and via video conferencing on Thursday, May 1st, 2025 at 10 a.m. for the purpose of considering the following. Notice of public hearing amending Town Code, Chapter 330-33 as it relates to business district uses. Notice of public hearing to repeal Southampton Town Code, Section 330-162.21, entitled Battery Energy Storage Systems in excess of 600 kilowatts. Notice of public hearing amending Town Code, Chapter 330-37, entitled Industrial Districts Table of Use Regulations as it relates to battery energy storage systems. Notice of public hearing to amend Southampton Town Code 123, entitled Building Construction, subsection 123-39.3, entitled Battery Energy Storage Systems. Notice of public hearing amending Southampton Town Code, Chapter 330, entitled Zoning, by adding new Article 33, entitled Battery Energy Storage Systems. Notice of public hearing amending Southampton Town Code, Chapter 330, entitled Zoning, subsection 330-76, entitled Placement of Accessory Buildings, Structures, and Uses in All Districts. Notice of public hearing amending Southampton Town Code, Chapter 157, entitled Type 1 Actions, to add new subsection 8 as it relates to battery energy storage systems with a capacity of 600 kilowatts up to a maximum of 5 MW as type 1 actions for purposes of SECRA. Notice of public hearing amending Southampton Town Code, Chapter 330, Section 330-10 as it relates to residential use tables. Appoint Police Officer Salvatore Loretta Start. Okay. Maria Z. Moore, Supervisor, Town of Southampton, dated April 28th, 2025.
Thank you.
Supervisor Moore,
Present.
Councilwoman McNamara,
Present.
Councilman Iacilli,
Present.
Councilman Pell,
Present.
Councilman Martell.
Present.
All right, thank you. I have one walk-on resolution that I'd like to, we're going to add on another walk-on. This Town Board Resolution ID number 49792 to authorize funding for Peconic Estuary Partnerships from the 2025 Community Preservation Fund water quality monies and to create a capital account for the water quality projects for a portion of the 2025 award. So I move to add that to the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then the public portion. Is anybody on Zoom or here for the public portion?
No one on Zoom.
Okay, then I move to close the public portion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so we have a special treat tonight with the swearing in of a new officer. So I move to take the resolution out of order. It's resolution number, Town Board Resolution number 2025-619.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Who was the second?
Cindy.
Okay, thank you.
So should pass the resolution first, right? Yeah, so Town Board Resolution 2025-619, co-sponsored by Councilwoman McNamara to appoint Police Officer Salvatore Loretta.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Well, thank you. Chief, I'm sure you have some comments to make.
Yes. Good morning, Supervisor, Town Council members, McNamara, Iacilli, Pell, and Martell. First, thank you very much for having us on the agenda this morning, and thank you for your steadfast support of public safety, and especially for our police department. This is Sal Loretta. Congratulations. Today marks an important milestone in your law enforcement career as you transition from part-time officer to full-time member of the Southampton Town Police Department. You were selected not just for your qualifications, but for the character and potential you've shown during your time with us. You are joining a department that holds itself to the highest standard, where integrity, professionalism, and service to the community are not just values, but expectations. The oath that you are about to take is a reaffirmation of your commitment to the law, to your fellow officers, and to the people we serve. It signifies the start of a new chapter, one that comes with increased responsibility and expectations. While you're not heading to an academy, your training is far from over. You will now begin a probationary period where you will be guided by our experienced officers and supervisors. They will sharpen your skills, strengthen your judgment, and prepare you for the many challenges you'll face as a full-time police officer. This period will test your adaptability, your decision-making, and your dedication to the mission of this department. You'll be expected to carry yourself with professionalism, demonstrate sound judgment, and earn the trust that this uniform represents. We are confident in your abilities and proud to have you take this next step. Serve with honor, listen and learn from those who have walked this path before you, and never lose sight of your responsibility that you now carry. Welcome to full-time service, and thanks for choosing our department and our community. Sal has a lot of support here, as you can see. There are 70,000+ people that live here year-round. And that number multiplies to over 250,000 people at any given time during the year, usually the summertime. And as calls for service come in, Sal and our officers respond to those calls for service. Sometimes they're to help people that need assistance. They're injured in some way. Sometimes they're handling a vehicle accident. Sometimes they're investigating crimes for these folks. And when our officers respond, they treat our residents with dignity, respect, and professionalism. And when they leave those folks feel as though they've gotten the best service that they could possibly get. Sal does this, I know, because he's been a part-time police officer for us. And in fact, the village of Sagaponack wasn't happy that we were taking them from him, but he's more useful to us as a full-time police officer. Those are the people that we interact with. But the overwhelming majority of people, the overwhelming majority of those 70,000 or the 250,000 don't get to the face-to-face contact. But those people expect that we're going to be professional. They expect that when they lie their heads on their pillow at night, that we are providing a blanket of protection for them. They expect that we are patrolling their neighborhoods and keeping prowlers away. They expect that we are taking intoxicated drivers off the streets so they can travel through our town safely. They expect that when their 17, 18-year-old new driver is learning the streets, they expect that we are enforcing the speed limit so that these kids could learn in a safe environment, so that people can get to and from places in this town where they need to go in a safe manner. That expectation Sal knows about. Sal has been with us in providing that safety for the village of Sagaponack, and we are very honored today that he's going to be joining our full-time police officers. And at this time, well, I want to say a couple of words to Laura and Sal, his parents. Sal being a New York, Suffolk County police officer for over 20 years. Nick and Christina, Emily, and I can't forget Aunt Debbie, want to tell you that Sal chose, as you know, it's a family business. Sal chose a dangerous profession to be in, right? It's not always the safest, but I'm giving you my word that me, the administration, the elected officials here in our town will provide Sal with the best training we could possibly give him, with the best equipment we could possibly give him, so that he can provide his service to the town in a safe manner, and he can come home to you safe after every tour of duty. We will do our best to provide that. At this time, Sal, will you please step up to the town clerk, Sunday Schermeyer, and she'll swear you in.
Please raise your right hand.
Just 1 second. Would you like to join him up here?
I state your name.
I, Salvatore Loretto,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of New York,
the Constitution of the State of New
and
York,
the Southampton Town Code,
and the Southampton Town Code,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and that I will faithfully discharge the
of
duties
Southampton Town Police Officer
of Southampton Town Police Officer
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Let's just step around so you guys got a picture of it.
Sure.
Hey, he'll go around and stand in the middle. You guys don't have to come out. He'll go to you. I'll come to you. Yeah.
Chief,
Guess
you
I'll
come
go
in
so
too.
they know what it's about.
Where you wanna go in the middle?
Switch?
Let the families take it first. Jumping in front of everyone, sorry guys. And one more, please smile.
I blink.
I just want to say the steps of Town Hall make a great photo area. Make sure you take your name tags off.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
I'm glad they didn't, because that was the last time we swore somebody in. He had a name tag on, and I just felt so bad. All his pictures, he's got his paper name tag on. Work session?
You can do it either way, but you got to adjourn either way. You got to adjourn the town board meeting, and then
Do the work session.
he'll switch the tape for work session, and then you'll come back in after.
Well, Sunday just read
They're
them
both
all.
noticed for the same time. They're both noticed, I believe, for the same time.
No, the work session was changed to 10:30.
Did you do that by resolution? Like, was that notice to the public? Because,
Yeah, the work session. was
the work
posted to the
sessions
public.
are noticed annually, right? So,
Yeah, but I noticed the change to the work session on the
Me too.
agenda. It says the resolution says
right.
unless otherwise noted.
And that's why I think you're doing one and then you're adjourning and then going into the next or something. I'm not
Because there are
sure
going to be,
how, what
there
your
are
plan
potentially
was. 'Cause
amendments
this-
that are going to be made
This isn't my plan, this is your.
to the resolutions as a result of the work session. So they can't vote on the resolutions until we come back from the work session.
Yes, you can.
No, you can't.
Not if we're amending them.
Well, when were these, all right.
Trust the process.
Well, and it's not up to the town clerk though either. It's up to
It's
the
unusual
legal.
This.
It's very unusual.
We don't usually have a special meeting. We don't have,
the agenda
we usually
was
have,
set,
right,
and
to accommodate the resolutions and the work session taking place at the same time. Trust the process. It'll work. You can just wait.
It's a conundrum, as they say.
Well, we're in town board meeting, so we can just adjourn it until after the work session, and then they'll just stop the tape, and then we'll
It's gonna take a
start
few
it at
minutes to do
10:30.
that anyway.
I don't think they can do that. What? Adjourn a town board meeting and then bring it back after a work session.
Of course we can.
So yeah, we can't end the portal, because then we'll have to restart it again for the work session. So we can't keep the special meeting open, because I can't get back in recording towards it.
So what are you saying?
So we'll close the special and then go into the work session. I think.
But we're coming back later into the special meeting.
Okay. Okay.
So it'll just all be one,
Okay.
right?
Are you aware of these changes?
No, I see what you're saying.
Janice aware of these changes?
That's the
No one is.
program.
We haven't done them yet.
Can't you just do them in the special meeting as part of the resolution right now?
Do we want to
That's
have
what
this
you wanna
discussion
do.
during
Do you
the
want the work
special?
session during the special meeting? You guys called a work
The
session for
special
this.
meeting should just discuss it, doesn't need to be a work session, it's at the meeting.
But it was published as a work session. I don't know what to tell you.
There's nobody here for the work session. I mean, we could just do this and make the changes and then.
We were anticipating,
Okay.
hold on.
That's right.
We were anticipating making the changes at a special meeting. That was the intent of going into the special meeting. But the board wanted a work session before that, so they set a work session for 10:30.
No,
But to be flexible, I mean, if we
Yeah, we did.
discuss it all in a special meeting, then we don't need to
Whatever
have
you wanna
a
do,
separate
I
hearing.
just don't understand what the difference is.
So then go into work session.
Well, I mean, it would just
Or
be as part
just
of the special meeting.
Then there's no work session. That's fine. That's fine. It doesn't matter. In substance, it's
Just so you
fine.
could talk about the changes.
We can talk about the changes at the special meeting.
And then we can close that and we could just do the work session with everything else.
For the other things, yes.
It's whatever you need to do to accomplish the goal.
So then we can just continue.
All right. And now you have your glasses.
I'm glad you all
So then-
deliberated.
It all works.
So then how does this work now? Do I read all of the resolutions or do we?
You're gonna have an explanation before you read them, I guess. I don't know.
Don't you have to have a motion and a second to discuss them?
That's a debate on the motion. You're not,
Okay.
this is I guess now will be a prelude into the reading of the resolutions. I call it whatever you want. I don't know what to say.
You wanna read them and then discuss them?
Yeah,
You may as well
let's do
just,
that, because if
Well,
there's
Sunday just-
points of discussion on each one.
the clerk just read them all, so.
But we should take it one at a time and do the changes, the whatever it is that you wanted to discuss that needs to be changed.
The changes weren't from them. They were to give the board an opportunity if they wanted to make changes. They're good with how it is.
I made my
We
changes.
presented it to you in the way we feel it should be. This was an opportunity, I thought, for the board to look at it and say, if you guys had any questions as a result of answers, wanted to make any adjustments or changes, and then if you're satisfied, we would vote on them, and if you want changes, we would put those changes in and then vote on them. So it's up to you how you want to do it.
Well, how about if we read, for example, the first resolution and get a second, and then Janice can explain how it was changed, and then we can all say if there's anything else we wanted to add at the
Okay.
last minute before we vote on it.
So I guess you guys can come up for the whole shebang.
Yeah, come on up.
And on this particular resolution, I have a note that we need to add a resolved clause about noticing and forwarding the copy of the law to the Suffolk County Planning Commission. Well, there was two of them.
Special meetings.
Say that again?
Hey, chapter 330 amendments. Sometimes we're seeing a lot of like, and send this to the county, and the county is getting confused. And
So this
I
is
just wanna make
the
clear
first.
that's the only time we send amendments to the county is chapter 330 amendments.
Okay, so the first one is 330? That does not have the language,
Sure.
so.
So do you mean to read the
And this
first
is-
resolution?
I think so.
Okay.
If I may, does everyone have a copy?
That's a matter of process, Sonny, just to make this easier. I'll talk to Shelley, and Shelley can add those to the two resolutions where it wasn't included.
Did you get one?
Okay, yeah.
Talk about it again.
It's just a table of contents for a quick reference
Perfect, thank
to
you.
the big one.
So start with Town Board Resolution 2025-611, was sponsored by the entire board. Notice of public hearing amending Town Code Chapter 330-33 as it relates to business district uses. I don't think there were any changes to this, right?
We added the different tiering systems, so we have on page 3, you'll see in the middle, under 7399, battery energy storage systems, small scale pursuant to 12339.3.
It should be also.
It should be all, that small scale should be all. It would be permitted throughout the business districts.
All
If I may,
the word
let's
small
just
should
like
go-
start at the beginning, just quickly, that this, so each time we amend the code, we always have a table of use regulations that everybody turns to and says, oh, can I do this in HB? Can I do this in LI 40? Can I do this? And so this change is related just to where these things are located. And it's a little hard to see because you have to almost put page 2 on top of page 3. And you'll see that the battery storage systems that are small, like very, under 80 kilowatt, right? Or
That's
under,
right. So 40 kilowatt hours inside of a building and 80 outside of a building. It is small scale.
even though it doesn't say small scale, it is small scale, and those say P, because those are just very
So
small.
this has to say,
batteries.
this has to say small scale.
It should.
It should say small scale. It's
Sorry,
just
I
that
correct myself
the
already.
title of 123 was changed. So
One
that's
point
why
very
the,
top.
yeah, it should
So
say
it's
small.
just saying small scale.
Okay.
Then they're talking about,
When you break it down.
We get larger and
So
larger.
just globally, we have the super small scale that's just regulated by the building code. That is really just a battery at your house, a battery at your business, not battery facility, big battery thing. All in this whole thing, just as a prelude to everything, we have taken away the original code that you were considering that went from up to 5 megawatt and then like a zone change type of procedure for 5 to 19. Now that's all gone. And the biggest battery you could ever get is up to 5 megawatt only. So now we're only talking about 0 to 80, 80 to 600, 600 to 5. Those are the 3 buckets. So
Including
everything we're
5.
talking about up to and including 5. And that's the cutoff point, and then can't propose 6, not even 5.5. It ends at 5. So just so everything we're talking about is 0 to 80, 80 to 600, 600 to 5. So that's what we mean when we say, and we're really only talking 2 tiers, the 80 to 600 and the 600 to 5. So I just want to make sure for the benefit of everyone here and listening in, it's clear. So each thing with all these different amendments are different sections of the code. And going, well, can I do this here? Can I do this there? Also, the bigger size, the 600 to 5, is only permitted in light industrial districts. as you requested.
And only it's a special exception?
And only as a special exception with the special safeguards and conditions intact. So we have two different types of special exceptions. One is where you just have general standards, and one is very specific standards. The general standards are talking about, is this even appropriate here? That's really like, should we even locate this in this location? That's the general standards. The higher tier goes through the general and then very, very specific safeguards that we have now placed into what is being called Article 33, which is starts at 334.26 in our code. So we took it out of like that zone change section and put it in its own section, just like cell towers. So just so we all know where everything's located. It's a little confusing because there's a lot of different code section amendments going on. So here, this code, this resolution is talking about just, can I do these small scales? Yes, P. Can I do tier 1, which is, like I said, the 80 to 600? X. No, you can't do those. You can only do those in LI districts, tier 1 and tier 2. So you see X across the board, so it's very clear.
No. Tier 1, we're in the business districts.
Oh, I'm sorry, tier 2 I meant. Tier 1 is SE general standards.
That's 600 to 5 megawatts, right?
No, that's 80 to 600. The businesses, like say you're a supermarket and you want to put a battery to offset your refrigeration. You can do that, but you can't go beyond 600. So that says SE, and those standards will say that in the SE section. Can you do 600 to 5 megawatt in any business district? No. Only light industrial. So that's what this code is talking about and doing. Are there any questions about that?
Nope.
Okay, we can move on to the next.
So we can actually adopt that.
You can set a hearing for it,
Well,
right?
yeah,
That's
but
what
we-
do. Yeah.
Should
We have a
Yeah.
motion and a second, we can vote on it.
To schedule the public hearing.
Schedule the public hearing.
Is that what this is doing?
Yes.
So do we want to do that, or do we want to go through all of them
May
first?
We
27th.
should do them by the each, like
Yeah,
we're
do
doing
them
right
by
now.
time.
So let's just review it, then you can decide to schedule it,
Okay.
and then we could do this again at the
Sounds
hearing.
good.
All right. So all in favor to schedule the public hearing?
Aye.
We're getting through it. We're gonna
Okay,
do it.
I just want to be clear about the amendments.
We didn't make any
You
amendments.
didn't make any
They're already on
amendments,
that.
did you? And
There
you're
are
gonna-
none. I'll tell you when.
You'll talk about the language, because, yeah, those amendments were coming from me. So, okay. Thank you.
So Town Board Resolution 612 of 2025, co-sponsored by the entire board. Notice of public hearing to repeal Southampton Town Code Section 330-162.21 entitled Battery Energy Storage Systems in Excess of 600 Kilowatt Hours.
Now, this has no
We need a
amendment,
second.
it's a.
We need a
Second.
Go ahead.
This code is literally to repeal the old code that you had a moratorium on. That's it.
Right.
It's just,
This was pretty simple.
Because it was too complicated to try to amend it, so
It's
you
too much.
suggested that we just take it out,
take it
replace
out,
it.
it's gone.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Town Board Resolution 613 of 2025, notice of public hearing amending Town Code Chapter 330-37 entitled Industrial Districts Table of Use Regulations as it relates to battery energy storage systems.
Yeah, this is,
Co-sponsored by the entire board.
Second.
this resolution is similar to the one that we were just talking about, except that we have a table of use just for the LI districts. So this now says, you can do tier 1, which is 80 to 600, and tier 2, 600 to 5 megawatt in LI 40 or LI 200 by special exception, and then we'll get to those parameters later. But this is just amending those use tables to be very clear. You'll see on, it's on page 14 of the whole packet. It's adding 10, 11, and 12. And the small scale, of course, again,
Permitted
it's just
throughout.
permitted throughout every district because it's just like sort of an accessory battery to, you know, some type of shop maybe, or another thing that's existing in LI. Any questions on that one?
No, it's just in the other one, you put what it meant to be a tier 1, didn't, or you didn't list it.
They're all defined in the code, everywhere.
So you just refer to the other section. Okay. That's good. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Town Board Resolution 614 of 2025, co-sponsored by the entire board. Notice of public hearing to amend Southampton Town Code, Chapter 123, entitled Building Construction, subsection 123-39.3, entitled Battery Energy Storage Systems.
Second.
There is an amendment on this in that where there's at the title where it says small scale, we would ask that be taken out. So it just does read battery energy storage systems.
Which is what it currently says. So you're not adding that small scale in front of it anymore, because this is referencing
Shelley has that.
the whole.
The whole code.
That's the only change, right?
Yep. I gave
Okay,
that.
and this is
Unless the
just,
board has some.
this is a great code because it's when you get down to the level of building permit, the plan reviewer and permit examiner is looking at all of these various codes that you've embedded in here. And the later sections allow for peer review to make sure that all these fire protection standards are being met. So that's what this code does. It adds all these different certifications as may be amended into our own code.
To be clear, a tier 1, a tier 2, and the smaller scale will all require building permits and electrical permits. So that's what's stipulated here. And it gives you the definition of how you would find out as a user using the code, what are the levels that would, the thresholds that would put you into the next tier above.
Any questions on that?
Christine, were there any other changes on that one?
No.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
You're
Hearings will
removing
be-
those words out of that resolution.
Yeah, just those,
Just at the title.
I gave this to the clerk's
So I have
office.
something that says it's on page 17 and on page 22.
That's for 5. Oh, in the proposed summary of the law, I'm sorry, on summary. That's just, it's not in the law, but in your direction, it should come out. Yeah, the
So
notice.
you're going to vote to amend
Vote
this
to amend.
resolution?
I'm asking them to
Should
do
we,
that,
yeah,
yeah.
I'll second,
I just want to try and keep up and make sure I get
no,
it
that's,
right,
thanks
that's
for
all.
pointing it
I'll
out.
make a motion to amend.
second on the amendment.
Okay,
All in favor?
Aye.
thank you,
Motion to approve is amended.
Second.
All in favor?
thank you.
Everybody good?
Yeah.
But you're saying there was a second change too, and then,
On a different one.
It's not in the law, it's in the notification summary on page 22.
Circle.
Yeah. so both, when we said as amended, it was both of those.
Ready?
Yeah, there it is. Okay.
Town Board Resolution 615 of 2025, co-sponsored by the entire board. Notice of public hearing amending Southampton Town Code, Chapter 330, entitled Zoning by adding new Article 33 entitled Battery Energy Storage Systems.
Second.
There are 2 amendments that I would ask the
So can I
board
say,
to make on this.
should we start with making a motion to amend?
That would be wonderful.
Motion to amend.
Section
Mike, a second.
Second.
Well, what are
are
the-
we amending?
what are
I just
the
want to know
amendments?
first.
amending, on page 34, you're changing.
34?
C,
Oh, hold on.
under AC, it's at the top of the page, and there's a reference to 3, I think it said 27.
427 will be changed.
427 should be 430,
So 330-430.
correct.
Numerical
I don't
mistake.
have a C. Oh, there it is. Say it
Let's
again.
see, right there. This is going from
It's in red
330
here
to
on mine.
420.
Okay.
430,
These are
sorry.
just formatting, it's not substantive, just so you know. And then on page 37,
Well, aren't there several on that page that you just pointed out?
That was the only one that's actually.
Oh, the highlights are not the changes. Okay. Proceed.
page 37, number 11. After applicability, it should say 330-2429A. After protection of aquifer, it should say 330-42913.
Not A.
Not A. Right?
Correct.
Keep-
No, A
Keep
should stay
the
there.
A. Keep the
Oh,
A.
okay,
It
okay,
didn't
got it,
say
got
it,
it,
sorry.
got
The
it.
429
Sorry.
was changing. And if somebody You made the motion
So
to
second.
amend.
Well, do we,
Second
well,
to the-
well, we already made that, but now we want to go through it, and if there's any other changes, then.
And just the global correction that anything that's not underlined should be underlined, because it's all being added new. So any like little there's just some, minute track is so tough with the formatting, it's hard to, so just any like letters or numbers that aren't underlined need to be encapsulated as being added. So it's
All of
usually-
it?
Anything that's not underlined needs to,
So even under like authority, section 3?
no, I mean just the code itself.
Oh, okay.
You know, sometimes you see the underlines and sometimes they're not underlined because of the formatting. It just needs to all be underlined, so we know that those sections are indeed being added.
What about the other highlights you had on page 34?
Well, let's go through it. I
Switched
think it's
over.
probably better to go from the beginning, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody received just a little cheat sheet of an outline that makes it much easier to look at. And so this code now, like we said, lives in its own article, like the cell tower code. Before, it was just one of the special exception types of 33162 that you're repealing. Now it's living in its own section, Article 33. And it begins as always with 424 at purpose. And that's the same purpose that you've been, that's been your objective all along, is to encourage, renewable energy and the storage, however, being done in a very safe and effective manner. Then we follow that with 425 definitions. And many of these definitions are from the state or the fire code. Just, so everyone is aware of what we mean when we're talking about a container, or what we mean when we're talking about, fire mitigation personnel, those types of things. So those are all the definitions. The next section is 33426 applicability, and that's what we've been talking about with those code, like it's sort of pointing people. Applicability says, where do I go? How does this apply to me? Well, if you're doing this, you're over here. If you're doing that, you're over there. So the small ones, like we said, are up to 80 kilowatt, 20 to 80 pretty much, and those are in the state building code. So those are just like how they have to be. If, say you put a battery in your garage, well, you need a bollard. You need to have it and the state code covers that. So we're just referencing back to the state code. Again, the tier 1, now we get into sort of the heart of the matter, and that is, again, it is not allowed in residential districts. None of this code is applicable in a residential zone, as you requested. The smaller ones up to 600 can be in commercial zones. So like we said, the supermarket, the business that needs a backup battery, but they can't go higher than 600. And there's minimum lot area requirements. And they're, basically they have to have at least 1 acre to do that. Tier 2 then, the applicability there is, okay, we can do up to 600 up to 5 megawatt. It's only allowed in the light industrial zones, and the minimum lot area is 2 acres. So if you're in a light industrial zone and you only have 1 acre, you can't.
And sorry, Janice, and this is considered a special exception?
That's right.
Okay.
Special exceptions are a funny term because people perceive them to mean, you're making some special exception for someone, but the truth is it's really it's a conditional use.
Right.
Like we'll give you that permission to have
Conditional.
that use conditionally, conditioned upon the fact that you meet all these
Right.
special safeguards. So,
We have those special exceptions in section 429, which we'll go through as well. For tier 2.
So you're an industrial district, you have twice the minimum lot area, and you still have to meet all the setbacks. So that's like the first level of applicability. Like, don't even request it if you can't even meet those basic parameters. And we get into the more technical stuff later. But that's why we have applicability, so that way, you just know right off the bat what you can and can't do. Of course, it says that you have to have a building permit, an electrical permit, anything that's already existing and being modified. You can't change that capacity without meeting all the standards.
If you increase your capacity, you'd be subject to special exception standards again. So.
Right, but we don't even have any existing, 33427 is the general requirements. And that is the first and foremost, so everyone can understand what you're asking, is to give us a narrative, this type of system, the product description, the technology type, who manufactures it, how much is the capacity, what's the efficiency of the system, and what's your intended use. So that's from the beginning.
And add the credentials of the individual, the applicant or his installers. We want to know if they have the technical expertise, if they have installed a facility before. We'd like to know as part of the narrative.
Endorsements.
Right, that this is not a fly-by-night operation. You have financial capabilities, they're insured, all the things. So this is what the general requirements of who the applicant is in the first place, because that came up a lot in the public hearings in the beginning. The second part, I mean, is this okay? I'm going through it
No,
like.
this
Oh,
is
yeah,
great.
no, we
This is
want you to.
So then again, we're talking about lot size,
We put in an extra caveat that if sometimes the facility builders, they want to lease a portion of a lot. So we want to say that even if you're leasing a portion, the entirety of the lot, the size is what applies, is not the leased section.
Right, and then it gets into questions about principal and accessory use. That comes up a lot. And this has to do with, like we were saying, is it accessory or is it like, oh, we're just saying it's accessory? So we have like parameters in here to really be able to tell if how much electricity are you generating and then how that compares. You can only be accessory if it's 24 times the average daily load of the energy, you're using or something. Like you're only so much of it.
It's a
So it eliminates the window dressing argument that somebody might put like one solar panel and have all this battery storage, right? So this is what this means. It's a little confusing in terms of the language, but.
Yeah, I would just add that this was language that was taken from the FDNY. The 24 times is a way to get around going from kilowatts to hours. So it comes down to the average daily load for the commercial site is what you're allowed. 1 day of usage of electricity is 1 day of storage.
Right.
We put a limit on that.
And that's
for an
accessory.
in a business. That way we have some security that these are not going to get too large.
Otherwise, it's your primary use, and then you have to follow those parameters. So it's very clear, and we can have a metric to determine that
And it would be capped again at 600
for regular business.
in business. It would not be going over that.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Go back to the small scale.
Mhm.
Go back to the small scale. It says install lab by bone permit behind the meter. That's where the battery goes, behind the meter.
No, it's like a term of art. Behind the meter means that, you want to explain it?
Yeah, it's
On
nomenclature.
that side of it,
It's
yeah, it's
just
not
It doesn't
physically
mean it's
behind.
doesn't
Yeah, I just
necessarily-
want to make sure because
in between the meter, front of the meter, behind the meter. It's a simplified way people refer to it. It does not
It's
physically.
for use.
Inside the building, right? Isn't that what it
could be
means?
inside or outside, and there's different requirements in the state
I just
building
want to make
code.
sure people realize that.
When we call it that, it's really,
We can
those
put
terms
quotes
are
on it.
related to the way the utility looks at it.
Yes,
More than the way we look at it. And that has to do with, are you,
on that side of the meter.
net metering behind the meter? Like, are you spinning backward and getting a credit? Now it's all confusing, but it used to be that you would offset your use by this credit because you were generating energy. Like, people understand that from solar.
So say this is in a condominium unit and you have 50 units, is anywhere you can't have the battery so close to another unit?
You can't have them at all, unfortunately. No residential.
It's accessory.
Accessory.
No, because it's.
Residential.
Residential.
For the small ones.
Small scale he's talking
Oh,
about.
for the small scale.
Yes.
Yeah, so that would not be.
Subject to fire code, certainly a lot of regulations. You can have up to 50 kilowatts together in an area. There's separation distances.
I
There's
just want to make sure
sizes for
people realize that
individual-
who are watching this. I don't want them to think
Those are
that.
very small scale and maybe like even in your basement or your garage, and those are like this big. It's like a little car battery. It looks
And-
like it's a tiny battery.
Sure, like a power wall would be 10
I
kilowatts.
just want to make sure that if it's a condominium unit and they're gonna have 30 units, gonna have battery backup. They
Yeah,
don't
all
put
that gets
all
regulated
in.
by,
Oh,
remember
all in the same? No,
No.
definitely
I
not.
just want to make sure that people realize that.
Definitely
No.
not.
And all that in that earlier resolution where it had all
We
those
talked
different
about that.
codes, the 123, that regulates all of that.
Okay.
So it can't be that, it has to be a certain way. For each unit, it can't be like one big battery.
Yeah, the applicability, the 40 and the 80 kilowatts, those are aggregates. So you could have a residence with up to 40 inside. So they could have 2 or 3 batteries. They would, again, there's a lot of codes on separation distances, where they can be put.
Yeah. They can be put
And-
in the basement, they can be put in a utility closet, they can be put in a garage, but they have to have a bollard so you can't drive into it.
Yeah.
There's all these, but they're very small.
I just want to make sure people realize if it's a
You're not gonna
complex,
aggregate 50 units worth of batteries into one structure
and you have battery
next to
storage
someone.
place.
Yeah,
You have
no.
another a mini bus. That's why I just want to make sure people
Which
realize
is
that.
forbidden by the code.
Yeah.
aggregating
Can't do
such.
Yeah. Okay, so, avoidance areas, this is a special exception criteria. That plan, now we're talking about, again, tier 2 in this case, where you wanna make an application to the planning board for something over 600 to 5 megawatt. And these standards now kick in. And the planning board, first and foremost, the planner would look at where you're trying to do it, or the building inspector, or anybody interpreting the code. And if they are within 300 feet of an occupied community building parcel, single-family residential parcel, and/or residential district, because sometimes you have LI and residential right next to each other. That cannot happen, because it has to be 300 feet separation from property line to property line. So that's the first, standard, that you can't be within that proximity. The second is that, and this was another amendment, it says industrial district or opportunity, we took out all opportunity parcels, so that's like a legacy statement there, but it should just say industrial district parcels that share any property line with a residential parcel or within 300 feet of a residential school, residential hospital, school, daycare, church, religious or other similar high occupancy building as measured from one property line to another.
So we should remove or opportunity parcels?
Or opportunity, so it should just say industrial district parcels.
Do you have that already?
I'm gonna get all of the language from Christine when you're done, because there's a lot going on, and I want to make sure it's
This is a
accurate.
new one, so we would just ask that this be added to the amendment, and I'll give this to Shelley.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I just noticed that this morning. Again, the avoidance, you're avoiding putting it in these places. So you're avoiding putting it on a parcel adjacent to a hospital, adjacent to a school, adjacent to a residence, etc. You're avoiding being in a coastal erosion hazard area. You're avoiding being a special flood hazard area. These are sort of intuitive. You're avoiding being in the core preservation area unless there's a hardship demonstrated to the Pine Barrens Commission. Normally you can't build anything in a core preservation area anyway. 6, avoid being in an aquifer protection where the clearing standards cannot be met. 7, agricultural and open space greenbelt areas. 8, historical and culturally significant resources, unless it can be demonstrated, if they can make that demonstration and make that showing to the planning board, maybe, but for the most part, no. 9, designated conservation areas, meaning not on CPF properties. 10, designated scenic corridors or view sheds. 11, within 500 feet of the right-of-way of a designated coastal evacuation route. It says
even
a
better.
designated routes, so it should say, take out the A, of designated coastal evacuation routes as established by New York State Emergency Management Office?
That's who establishes
The coastal evacuation routes?
coastal
Oh, good.
evacuation routes.
And 12 wetlands. So obviously people don't want to put battery storage in wetlands. That's just not going to happen anyway, but we want to make it clear.
And that's 300 feet.
Yeah, well, it's saying avoid being in wetlands, tidal or
Altogether.
freshwater, altogether. I mean, I guess if you're 300 feet from a wetland, you could make the argument, but we're really saying avoid those places. Plus the
The dampness.
damp
And
area,
you
it just
also
doesn't
have
seem
to, you have to be able to store any water, so the chances of you being able to
You'd
put
have to
something
like
in,
elevate it, FEMA, it just doesn't make sense. E says, and this is a separate code that you, were,
Chapter
I mean, we
157.
have even in our code for generators in FEMA areas where they have to be elevated to a certain height and everything. I mean, that would all apply here as well. I mean,
yes, except that we're saying if you're trying to do like a facility up to 5 megawatt.
we don't
avoid
have any
wetlands
LI
entirely.
40 or LI 200 in wetlands.
You never know, like sea level rise, wetlands are encroaching all over. So it's just making it very clear. We want people to avoid putting these facilities in or near wetlands. We now will designate, so you have an even greater scrutiny, type 1 action. So there's no question. They have to go through the environmental assessment forms, the long form, and look through, if it's a type 1 action, we'll have to treat it as such. So that's in a separate companion code that designates what is a type 1 action. So it's here and it's there. Insurance, those are, go without saying, home harmless.
Comprehensive liability.
So you have to have all the insurances and indemnifications included. Then there's a section about exemptions, which every good code has. So it's clear that that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about, things that are being switched out. Say they already have all the permissions and now you're switching it out. We're not gonna say you gotta start all over again and do this all, again. If there's, batteries that are.
Prepackaged batteries, for
Yeah,
example.
like certain things that
Equipment that have batteries within them. There is some modification that is allowed again that does not increase the aggregate electrical capacity. Part of battery energy storage is those cells are continually losing their capacity to store. So it is part of the industry to understand that these things will have to be swapped out within the first couple cycles. They're doing 80% of the storage capability that they had before, so.
And I did ask that you add, and I see it is here, that basically if there are any, they have to get their permits, obviously. And then it also states in here that delivery and/or removal from the site must also be coordinated date, time, and route with emergency services, because these are generally containers of batteries that are coming on a flatbed and being craned into or out of these sites, so.
Great.
That's something you found at your.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple changes that I asked for in here that were because of that 3 hours that we spent with basically, industry experts. And, I think we took the stuff that makes everything more stringent, not the stuff that they gave us that was kind of like, you don't need this, you don't need that. We focused on what they gave us that, to me, made sense from a safety standpoint. And that was a big one because they had the actual picture of the crane, and you don't really think about it. You think of like little battery units coming in and out, but these actually come in as full mega packs.
Large, heavy units.
Yeah.
So then going
The
into,
last one would be mobile units, up to 600 for the exemptions. They're becoming more useful in emergency situations. They can cart in electrical backup where it's needed.
in the case of an emergency or something like
Is this something also that we're gonna have to look at too with like our special event codes where they wanna bring in, we're gonna running a generator with the noise and all, and they want, I'm assuming that they're gonna head in that direction where they're gonna wanna bring in a 600 megawatt battery pack? That's
kilowatt.
not megawatt, sorry. Start freaking people
Yes,
out.
and they would be exempt. Those smaller ones, 80 to 600, they could bring in a temporary, like the US Open or something, which they don't want to do that. They want to do generators still to this day, but if they did, it would be.
Yeah, I'm thinking like a special
But it
event
has
with
to
a couple
conform
hours.
with the UL and National Fire Prevention codes that are governing that. Then we get into the special conditions for tier 2, which again, tier 2, I just keep saying it, is 600 kilowatts of 5 megawatt. And just that, again, you need 2 acres, you have to abide by the setbacks of the LI districts. You can't aggregate to be more than 5. So you can have two different parcels, one with 3 and one with 2, but you can't have two different ones with 5 each, because that would be 10. The height, screening, you know, that it's just these are your laws that are telling the planning board what they have to ensure. And the planning board has to ensure that the site has direct frontage on a road, and the road is adequate. Like, it's not just some dirt road that no one can get down, you know, it's a proper road. They have to have screening, they have to have a landscape, maintenance plan. They have to ensure the enclosure, I'm now on page 32, number 6, that the enclosure is properly on a concrete pad. It's certified, I'm sorry.
And no. And just as a formality here, it's important just to clarify, this is not pertaining to residential.
This is only in industrial districts.
Right.
Tier 2.
Yep.
Tier 2, 600 kilowatts
Yep.
or 5 megawatt. So that's the biggest you
This
can
would be
get.
like
is
a
5.
commercial plan that came before the planning board.
Correct.
On the height, does it say you can't stack them?
You can't be more than 15
Or
feet.
15, so that would prevent that kind of,
Yes, and they don't want to stack them. We've heard that from them
Yeah.
directly, that that's not something they want to do.
Typical container is 9 feet tall, give or take, if you were
Let's
looking.
say the planning board wants to make it look like a barn or something, you know, they give them that little extra height, so it doesn't look so, you know, industrial or something. If they want to have some design flexibility, you know, it could look a little better potentially than what you would normally see. So you have a pitch roof, basically. So this enclosure standards, you know, you can't have any landscaping or any fire hazard within 20 feet around the container. That there's fencing around the facility, that they have, you know, bollards, barriers, you know, everything has emergency vehicle access. And then, you know, the security fencing is labeled accordingly. Then we get into right-of-way and utility lines, that they can't have anything in the front yard. We've designated a transitional front yard, so that, you know, you're not gonna see any enclosures within 50 feet of any roadway. That the utility lines are placed underground to the extent that they can by LIPA, but our code requires it.
The interconnect would be above ground, that's just.
The
a
interconnect is
LIPA
above ground, but
requirement.
anything else, like say on the 50-foot, you know, would be underground. Which is a normal requirement in all of our subdivisions. We require all the utilities underground for many, many years now.
We would only allow it to be above ground if it was abutting a substation.
do we feel like 20 feet is enough of the,
That comes directly from other
Vegetation.
codes. Cindy had asked that we actually refine that a little bit, and we were mentioning that maybe native species could have been used, but we have decided
Has to remove all ground
gravel
cover.
for 20 feet around. We
Yeah.
have the concrete pads as well, and since we're discussing tier 2, we're also going to be looking at aquifer protection here in a moment, which would be the retention pond.
especially because since they say you have to just let it burn. So I would
Absolutely.
hate for the heat to catch anything near it.
We've
20
also
feet
stipulated
seems adequate.
fencing is non-flammable, so that's another.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I glazed over that. Then, an important thing, which I'm glad it got into this new code, is protection of the aquifer for anything in excess of 1 megawatt. So basically from 1 megawatt to 5 megawatt.
It says gravel may be placed. Should we require that? On the,
Must.
just because weeds will grow up and then catch
Where were,
Enclosure, gravel, or other suitable
on
material.
6, page 32.
Oh, C.
Yeah.
So right now it says gravel or other suitable material may be placed within, and you're saying it should be shall, not may.
I'm suggesting just to avoid any vegetation growing
requirement.
up.
Okay, so we're gonna change that may there on 6C to shall. And you see like A, B, and C aren't underlined, like that's what I was meaning when I said like those underlines.
It's
have to-
underlined in ours.
It is? Oh, good. Sorry, I have an older one.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So I was on protection of aquifer, which is number 9, and that is that, in this case, we're talking about an emergency sort of runoff retention system. So any water or anything goes to like a retention pond that's lined, that water can then be tested, like nothing's just seeping into the ground, right? Like it's all going into a retention holding space.
It's important to note that it's special to our code, right? Because like the city doesn't have this, because I asked that question because it looked like everything, like the entire site was cleared property line to property line. It was all gravel. And I said, do you have to retain? And they said, no, other than a normal SWIP plan, which is your normal stormwater retention plan. Other than that, once there is a fire involved, everything can free flow off of the site in the city. So
we've designed a system where within 20 feet, that gravelly area, all that water that's used to, if it's used to put out a fire, or usually, they use water to usually cool down adjacent areas. That water would be collected. We have a 10,000 gallon minimum. Again, this is why we put it to 1 megawatt and above, because it seemed like too much of a requirement for the smaller ones. So 10,000 gallons, it would be, that water would be collected, tested prior to release. It would be connected to the stormwater system, but it would have a severable connection so that it could be encapsulated or retained in the pond. And then it would be tested for pollution, and that's what we're trying to achieve.
What does that look like? I'm not visualizing it. So 20 feet around is all gravel. Is there a
So there's
structure
like
under
storm
it?
drains.
French
It would
drains.
drain. There would be a drainage and then piped into some kind of lined retention pond that fills up. That fills up with water from the drainage, and then that water doesn't get like sort of released until you make sure there's no toxins in there.
On a day-to-day basis, it would be open.
Piped into a retention pond, basically. If you can picture a retention pond. And lined. I mean, we have retention ponds on golf courses. We've acquired. So it's not unheard of.
I would add that Washington State has also developed similar requirements as well, so that we're not alone in just creating this willy-nilly. This was also found in
I
other
think it's a good
codes.
idea, just having trouble visualizing what it
It would
looks
basically
like.
be piped over to some kind of retention, and it is a fair amount of engineering. I mean,
But if
you
you're
need to-
hosing down the whole 20 feet area that surrounds the battery unit, how is it not seeping,
they don't
going into the ground? Is there?
It's from what I saw on the site, it's not, they don't come in with a fire hose and hose the site down. It's all preset with nozzles that are directed right on the cabinets. So what they actually do is, and I think in our code we have where it has to have a fire hydrant within so many feet. So what you do is you hook that hydrant into a standpipe, which feeds to those nozzles, and then those nozzles spray directly onto the unit so that it's all within that enclosed area and it's not water basically shooting from a truck onto the property. It's actually they're NFPA, I don't forget the number, but nozzles that they're made for that purpose, and they direct the water directly onto the cabinets.
Internally,
Yeah.
these
So basically, they don't even have to, firefighters don't even have to enter the site. They hook up right at the street connection, and that puts the water right onto the units without them ever even entering the site.
And then what Supervisor I think is saying is then what?
Then the water just flows to drains, well, in the case of the city, it flows right off of the site.
Into a pipe. If they
It has to
pitch
be
it,
pitched
they have to
somehow into
engineer
a
it.
drainage.
And that's why I asked them if they were
Structure.
Pitch
containing it.
into a drainage structure.
It will be approved by the town engineer. That's certainly part of it needs to be approved by the fire marshal and the town
You can
engineer.
make sure that
That's in
for
here,
the,
yes.
for the pipe has to be heat resistant to that belt and the nozzles.
I think that's
NFPA,
probably an
that's the
NFPA.
NFPA.
Yeah, all those other codes say.
We will
cover
get
that.
more into this and.
That's
when
under
we look-
123, those requirements, when they look at all those pipes and et cetera. Then, section 10 is talking about signage, which we all are aware of. There's very specific sign placards that are required, so we're just reiterating those. Warning signs, voltage, et cetera. Lighting, we're just saying it's limited to that's required for safety and has to comply with dark sky standards.
Thank you.
Sure. Noise. The 1 hour average noise generated from the battery energy storage system components and associated ancillary equipment shall comply with noise standards found in section 235. So that's like that decibel rating. And applicants may submit equipment and component manufacturer noise ratings to demonstrate compliance. And they may be required to provide operating sound pressure level measurements from a reasonable number of sampled locations to demonstrate compliance. However, I have to say, once again, we are,
With our
this is
setbacks.
overkill. You have 2 acres and you're in an industrial zone and you can't even be near a residence.
But it's good to have it in there though,
Sure.
right? Because people have said like the sound from some of these facilities is, concerning. So it's nice that it's there.
This is probably the most heavily regulated thing in all of our code, so
It's very good.
it's good. So drainage, we're talking about drainage patterns.
And that's just like the SWIP plan. That's,
Drainage, water retention
Yes,
system,
very similar.
stormwater interconnects, culvert siding, detailed drawings shall be submitted. So the stormwater management officer here is our town engineer. Then it gets into 330, 430 is application requirements. What are you required to submit? So you may have to submit further studies. The planning board may do peer review. We require escrow. We do this right now. This is codified, but if there's something that they don't know and they need to have an expert, what happens is the applicant pays the town and the town retains the expert. So the expert is working for us. That's usually how we do it.
something that I did want to ask you about though, it's obviously not for right now, but when we actually adopt the code and we go into the effective date of the code, I would ask that you reach out to the planning board and make sure that they are comfortable with it and they have any extra training that they need before it goes into effect. Because I don't want to be caught in a situation where they get an application in and, they haven't had time to digest it and ask questions or get any kind of guidance, so.
I will be
Yes, and-
giving them a work session, giving them this briefing. I've
Okay.
also informed them that we are on today if they wish to look in. But working with the planning board, it will be my
Okay.
specialty per se.
Great.
And we'll fill them in on all the
Yeah,
details.
so if we need to push back that, effective date a little bit to give them time, we can do that.
Sure. So these are just peer review, then we get into B is all about submission. And that's really just the documentation, more documentation requirements. B2 this is related to interconnection agreements with LIPA. We want all the stuff that you have to give them, basically. We want to see everything. So it requires like a duplication. But a lot of the testimony from the public hearings were people saying, we don't even know, and we don't, how do we find out, and not sending people to FOIL for it. We just want them to have to submit it in the record.
I can step in if you'd like to I have copious notes on peer review.
Do you want to go over any more of that? I'm trying to keep it
Oh,
brief.
Well, I guess I would like to point out that peer review is something that we've set up for the entirety of the battery energy, applying for any battery. The chief building inspector can require it, can ask for it. Tier 1, it's going to be required as well. The planning board, I should say, the planning board can waive that if it's a very simple battery.
Is that essentially what you were saying with respect to the you need endorsements? Is that what the peer review is?
Peer review is sort of a technical expert who can assist.
in.
Like that's like what you were saying, like the planning board, one of their concerns initially was that they didn't have the right training or knowledge to review such a thing. Well, now we've embedded into the code, you've provided for the fact that they can retain their own technical expert to help.
The planning board?
Yes.
So
Do
who
the
who would qualify under that classification?
Tier 1, the planning board.
You mean who's a technical expert?
Right.
A technical expert is there's many consultants in the battery energy storage field or in the energy space, renewable energy realm of, and also NYSERDA claims that they're going to be creating this sort
List
of
of vendors.
list of vendors that we can choose from.
So are
but-
these essentially industry leaders, or are they people who are sort of, tasked with, evaluating these types of facilities and?
They could be engineers. They could be, people in the energy industry experts, people that are building. Like we had Kearsarge build
Right.
our solar,
Right.
and somebody like that
Right.
should be qualified as a technical expert. Oftentimes, you see a different, like say in the ZBA or something, people get qualified as an expert to provide testimony. So we would have to see their credentials and know that they're able to give us meaningful advice before we would retain them.
That's good information. So does the planning board have the determination to select the individual that, or the group that they would have evaluate a particular project that comes before them?
What we typically do, like say with traffic analysis, we would say, here's who you can choose from. And they would look at their resume, they would look at their history, and they would look at the type of work they do, and they get to pick who they want.
Okay.
In
so
this
it's-
case, we're hoping that we can work with NYSERDA to curate this list of appropriate vendors in advance.
So it's not the applicant that gets to select a person.
It never is.
No. And so, like, just as a point of reference, there was actually just an article in the paper about Riverhead is doing a bus facility, and they're having an expert come in because the facility is, I believe, right next to like a propane storage yard.
Yeah.
So they're talking about a berm or what they would need to put between the two, and so the company that they're hiring is actually. Then that's one thing. The company that we went to when we were up in Staten Island, they will actually do real testing on certain scenarios that you bring forward. Like, hey, we have this special scenario that we want specific testing for. You can require that, and they'll get that testing done before it even goes into the location. So,
But as a point of, the special exception standards here would say, if you're not suitably located, and the planning board right off the bat can be like, you don't even meet that first level of, why do we have to even go through all that?
You're not
They
wasting
absolutely
honestly-
could say,
Right.
this is not suitable, this is a
You're not
propane
wasting
tank,
people's time.
and this is a battery, and like, it just doesn't go. So we do have then, I'm not even gonna comment on Riverhead's, them
I mean,
doing
our
that.
code, this code is very, very, very stringent. And from what I gathered from that meeting that we had was they aren't looking to come into a new place with a new code like this that's very intensive and start off, because they want to be able to do what they do and replicate it time and time again. So that's why they're building these things in the city, because the city has a code that they're very familiar with. They know all the standards. They just, it's basically a cookie cutter process for them. They know what's requested of them. They know what's required, and they just kind of go down the line.
I just want to be careful to say this is, but not designed to be overly burdensome
No,
to
it's
discourage.
not.
It's appropriately
This is
responsive
it
to
takes into
comments and all
consideration
No, I know. I'm just
specific
I know
things
what you
like the
meant.
aquifer.
I know what you
and-
meant. I just wanted to make that clear for the record.
Yeah.
Somebody else will twist it.
So, yeah. So we want to be able to engage a peer review when indeed it's necessary. And you've provided the planning board with that tool here. So they can do
Which
that.
is very, very important.
Yeah, I think that's really a good thing that you did there. So tier 2 submission, again, I was talking about showing us all your interconnection agreements, your power purchase agreements, the stuff you've already, that's a huge process through LIPA. So that, so we want to see all that. It's a little chicken and eggish because LIPA wants to see site control and we want to see the power purchase agreement. So I don't know how that's going to play out because it's a little like we want their thing and they want our thing. And we've been talking to Gary about like how does that work? But
Wouldn't we want to? I mean, especially with tier 2, wouldn't we want to see that there's LIPA involvement at that point?
we do, and so we said, we want to see your.
There's
I expect
preliminary analysis.
there's some preliminary analysis they've done, but I don't know that we'll get the full agreement. There may be a point in time where they come back in the planning board and say, I don't have
I get what
this
you're
because I didn't get site control.
Right.
I don't have site control until you give me permission, and I can't get permission until, so it's a little bit of a agency football there that I don't always like to see, but at least gives us the ability to get it or hear why they can't give it to us.
And it proves the applicant's gone through the necessary background check to see, is this site even, does it work, does it have the hosting capacity for the amount of electricity that's coming in and out? So there are letters that are generated when they go through the interconnection procedure, examinations as to what are the requirements for the electrical grid or what they're trying to perform on that particular parcel.
So just skipping ahead, it's now, so again, more and more about the peer review. Did you look at suitability? Did you look at alternatives? Did you look at, modeling and how close are you to a forested woodland or somewhere that we don't want you to be? This all then harkens back to like, is this site really suitable? You may be in an industrial zone, but you could also be in a place that's precarious. So, all of this is about, is this site really suitable? It's again a way to really delve into that. Even further, then we talk about the part 1 of the environmental assessment form, electrical diagrams, project description of the phases and timeframes, a preliminary specification sheet that documents the proposed best components. All of this would be like peer reviewed, when they gave us all of this, but I expect it to be a big document. And how the system would be commissioned, meaning how do you expect this to be built, the timeline, and then how are you going to start it up and start, functioning. Again, the commissioning has to be done by someone qualified. They have to show us all their bona fides, certifications, et cetera.
It also allows for us to see if things had to change because the interconnection couldn't be made or certain equipment weren't working well, then they have to come back to us with a revised plans showing that, well, when we tried to turn it on, this had to change. This didn't work.
Right.
This is that opportunity.
And then when you start talking about commissioning, of course, that's when you start talking about the fire safety compliance plan. And this is where the most important part is that, everything, what you would do in an emergency, how would you handle that? How are people going to be trained? Our emergency management personnel, our fire marshal, the people who are having to respond. I don't think we mentioned it earlier, but in design and access, I think this came up by Councilman Pell about, we want to see like staging actually in your site plan. You'd be like, oh, this is where the battery and everything is going, but this is where if there was an emergency, people would park and they're not on the road and they're over here. And, we want to see all of that. And that's what part of the response plan. So this gets into the nitty gritty about, what in the worst case scenario would be done. Who's being notified? How are they being told? What's the response time? Blah, blah, blah.
And now this, and now this plan has to be evaluated once every 3 years.
Yes.
I like the part that they provide training once a year for our, first responders.
Because the people who are, our local response, the people of this community who have to walk into something like that need to know what they're dealing with.
Yeah.
And so that's important.
And there's new people that come on board to the fire department, so once a year is good, and it's at the applicant's expense, I see you put in here, so that's good.
Yeah, they should be told, and then there's some, cameras, a 24-hour alarm system, monitoring 24/7.
Yeah, those infrared cameras are the ones that I asked for.
Thank you. That's really, really important. So, and everything also in accordance with, the uniform code, UL testing,
National standards.
national standards, as may be amended, because those are the most strict that you can get. Then we're talking about stormwater management again. We want to see that plan. It needs to be, we're talking about the aquifer protection, the drainage situation, anything along those lines has to be encapsulated into the stormwater management plan. There's a separate section about there's fire safety compliance and then there's emergency operation response. It's kind of redundant, but it goes without saying that these are the two most important parts of the code. Is that,
I would just add that the emergency response looks at different contingencies. Was it terrorism, or was it a fire, or was it it looks more into the evacuation routes, the particular safety, the fire compliance is more the safety apparatus. The emergency operations, how do we get people in and out? How do we notify the citizenry that there's a problem? During what times of year would we face challenges in different situations? So
Yeah,
it's
it's sort of like a hazard mitigation plan.
And
safety data
and-
sheets, removal.
And
of
this was
procedures.
primarily, examined and included because of a lot of the concerns brought by the public about fire safety in particular and what to do in those certain scenarios.
It has been it was part of the model code, but we have fleshed it out as we've learned more about the incidents that have occurred at various battery facilities. We've learned the right to correct our procedures. So this is an attempt to get the most up-to-date plans and knowledge that we
Ensure
can
preparedness.
and up our preparedness, absolutely.
And it says like emergency procedures to be followed in case of fire, explosion, release of liquid vapor, damage of critical parts, sounding alarm, notifying the fire department, how to approach where are you going to stage, how is it going to,
And so a lot of this was in place too for when we were originally talking about larger systems as well, but because we are now 5 megawatts and under, and that's all we're allowing, we haven't removed any of this.
That's right.
We're still treating it as a major facility.
Right, because the idea is that over time, if these facilities you feel good about them, then you'll revisit, anything later. But for now, the 5 is the cap, and see how that goes, and make sure everything is operating smoothly and the way it was intended, and then go on from there. And then the next part is all about decommissioning. Now you had your battery storage and everything was fine, and now how do you turn it off and take it apart and put it away? And it's not going to pollute our environment. It's not going to degrade into the ground. It's not going to have any kind of toxic byproducts. So this talks about, well, how long is this storage system supposed to last? If it's 20 years, what happens in 20 years? And that's what this whole number 13 is
And the code is left
about.
open for us to develop the way the fee is set, right?
It says there's a decommissioning fund, and the owner and operator of the emergency storage system shall continuously maintain a fund payable to the town of Southampton in a form and amount approved by the town board, similar to, you see these all the time when you're getting
But so we can
bonds.
change the formula without having to change the code.
It says in a form and amount approved by you.
And a method with the decommissioning cost, method by which the decommissioning cost will be kept current.
And it does have a fee schedule, that's just to apply. I don't think that's for the fund. The fund just says in a form and amount approved by the town board. All costs shall be borne by the applicant.
I just did want to make sure we didn't have to amend the code every time that changes.
I think it's important to say, well, this cost is escalating or this is changed, so we're going to change it. And then it just goes into compatibility and penalties. And that is the end of it.
Did we want to look at, so I noticed that the penalties are exercised by a fine of not less than 500, no more than 1,500. I see that sort of like in line with our violations of like things like stop work orders and stuff, except we just recently amended that to 750 minimum. Is that something that we would want to look at for just in terms of consistency, or just up to the board?
Just everything about
Yeah, 500.
You want it consistent with what?
750 instead of 500 on page 40.
Okay.
That's for a second offense.
That's for a second offense, right?
Okay. So these amounts will be amended to be in line with the other codes.
Thank you.
And then just the penalty section, authority, and severability and effective date.
Second to the amendments.
All in favor to amend this?
Aye.
Motion to approve is amended?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, very good.
So then we just have a couple left, one more.
Town Board Resolution 616 of 2025. Notice of public hearing amending Southampton Town Code, Chapter 330, entitled Zoning, subsection 330-76, entitled Placement of Accessory Building Structures and Uses in All Districts.
Second.
Are you amending anything?
What's this one, Janice? Just briefly, why
This
did we
again
need to
is
do it?
Very simple, it just it takes away, there's a section in the solar energy system talking about that solar can be used in conjunction with batteries, and that crosses that out because that section got taken out. And then it adds M to this section, it adds, M is already there, it adds some language to M about, how it has to be stored. And on page 50, it takes out some of these remnant, because all of this is now covered in the special exception. So you don't need to be redundant here. So it's talking about, the only thing this is accessory. Remember, it was only 24 times the average daily, whatever. So
Yeah.
all that doesn't matter anymore, so we took it all out. Does that make
Okay,
sense?
yeah.
Yep.
That's that.
Christine, you didn't have any other changes to that one?
It was a but it's fine.
All in favor?
Aye.
Town Board Resolution 617 of 2025, co-sponsored by the entire board. Notice of public hearing amending Town Code Chapter 157 entitled Type 1 Actions to add new subsection 8 as it relates to battery energy storage systems with a capacity of 600 kilowatt hours up to a maximum of 5 megawatts as Type 1 actions for purposes of SECRA.
Second.
This is pretty self-explanatory, it just adds number 8. So you see there's a whole list of things that are type 1 and battery, tier 2 batteries, 600 kilowatt to 5 megawatt will be treated as a type 1 action. No conversation about it, it's codified.
Okay,
good.
all in favor?
Aye. Town Board Resolution 618 of 2025, co-sponsored by the entire board. Notice of public hearing amending Town Code Chapter 330, Section 330-10 as it relates to residential use tables.
Second.
Okay. This is again the accessory use tables in the residential zones. And it just says, small scale pursuant to 123. Again, those are the up to 80 small batteries in your garage, in the utility closet, on the, related to the solar on your house. Tesla battery, wall, whatever. That's what this is talking about. And those are P. And then anything over tier 1 and 2, it's very clear X. Cross it all out. So anything beyond the 80 kilowatt hour is X.
40 inside, kilowatt hour inside, 80 outside.
Right. And that's state building code. But we're saying those, the original, idea was that you could do, in the opportunity areas in residential zones, and now it's not.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Well, thank you. This was a massive
Wow.
undertaking, and
I
we're
have
so
to thank
appreciative.
Seth and Christine for
Wow.
everything they did to.
Well done.
Really, well done.
Yes, but I would just say too, just to Maria's point, very historic. I mean, we're one of the first towns, at least I'm sure other towns are mulling these things over.
They
but
are,
it's,
they're
it's,
still working through them.
it's great that we're moving ahead. So
Yeah,
Try
and
to
there are
make it
so
safe.
many other sections of the code that get implicated with small changes that have to be made, so that was
massive
really
undertaking.
appreciated. Were you saying something else too?
Just trying to make it safer.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah, and
for all
I
the work, appreciate it.
I also want to thank all of the people that came in. I mean, this is 2 years in the making with not just public hearings, but also the public portions when all of the residents from, Hampton Bays and elsewhere came in and raised their concerns. And it's a lot of those concerns that drove this code, so.
Now, people don't have to move away from where they might go.
So all of these public hearings are gonna take place on May 27th.
Be here.
And because we've done such a thorough review, well, we'll see what happens that day, but we might be able to adopt it
I think.
the day.
Well, we have to,
The hope is that we can. We're trying to get all the referrals done, so we have to do, and
Is there a specific deadline with respect to the moratorium?
it expires on the same day. I'm not
Oh.
concerned if it's relatively within,
Probably
a
one.
week, 2 weeks, whatever. I mean, do it, we've come this far, do
Give
it,
the
do it
2
right.
weeks And
I'm
let
not
people have their
You
time.
took a notice of adoption for the repeal one, and that's what the moratorium is based on.
Yeah, we could at least do that. We don't want to,
Then you don't have to worry
Thank you.
about that.
yeah, let's at least.
Okay.
Yeah, or we could have them all ready in case there's no comments and we don't have any discussion. All right, thank you both so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you very much for your time and assistance.
And then I do have the town board resolution ID number. You're not on this.
Yeah.
49792.
792.
Thanks for coming in.
I think I'm sticking around for this.
Okay.
I
To-
just have to run downstairs.
Okay. To authorize funding for the Peconic Estuary Partnership from 2025 Community Preservation Fund Water Quality Monies and to create a capital account for water quality projects from a portion of the 2025 award.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so I move to close the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.